The night the first bodies were discovered, the hills of rural Florence were drowning in fog, so thick it looked alive. Car headlights glowed faintly through the mist as two young hikers stumbled down a narrow dirt road, shaking, breathless, and repeating the same phrase over and over. Che qualcuno laggiù, qualcuno stia guardando. Someone's down there, someone is watching. By the time Carabinieri officers reached the isolated vineyard where the hikers had fled from, dawn had barely begun to scrape the horizon. The earth smelled of wet soil and crushed leaves. And the silence was unnatural, like the countryside had swallowed its own breath. The officer's flashlight swept over the abandoned car first, a small, pale blue Fiat, its driver's side door wide open, keys still dangling from the ignition. Inside were two jackets, a half-open bag of roasted chestnuts, and a woman's leather purse on the passenger seat. Everything looked peaceful at first glance. Too peaceful. Then the first officer noticed the footprints, fresh impressions in the mud, circling the car like someone had been pacing. But the steps didn't lead away. They just looped and looped and looped, as if the person had been waiting, or watching. A metallic glint near the vineyard's edge caught another officer's attention. He pushed through the vines and froze. Two forms lay partially hidden beneath tangled branches. A man and a woman, both in their 20s, their bodies positioned carefully, almost gently, as if placed there by someone who took their time. The woman's hand rested on her chest. The man's arm was extended outward, pointing toward the darkness of the vineyard rows. Their faces were peaceful, too peaceful. No signs of struggle, no signs of panic. But their stillness felt wrong. It felt arranged. The lead investigator, Inspector Matteo Vieri, arrived minutes later, black coat, cigarette untouched behind his ear, the kind of man who'd seen too much death and trusted too little. He studied the bodies in silence. Finally, he said the words that made every officer's throat tighten. This wasn't an accident, and it wasn't a robbery. Whoever did this, they wanted us to find them. The fog thickened around them, swallowing the sound of his voice. Within hours, the hillside buzzed with officers, journalists, and locals whispering prayers. The region had seen crime before, petty thefts, the occasional bar fight, a missing tourist now and then. But this was something else. Inspector Vieri examined the victims closely. No gunshot wounds, no knife marks, no defensive injuries, no signs of sexual assault, nothing missing from their belongings. If not for the pallor of their skin and the stillness in their chests, they could have been asleep. Then he saw it. A single scrap of paper folded inside the man's shirt pocket. No name, no handwriting. Just a small, printed message. L'amor mio nel silenzio. Love dies in silence. Vieri stared at the words, and the hills around him felt suddenly colder. He turned to his team. This is a message. A beginning. He's telling us he'll do it again. And he did not say if. Rumors spread to the nearby village of Castelluccio. By afternoon, market vendors whispered about a specter of the vineyards. Elderly men spoke of a shadowy figure seen wandering the fields at night. Teenagers claimed they heard footsteps following them on the country roads. But one detail circulated more than any other. A man, tall, thin, wearing a dark coat, seen drifting between the cypress trees at dawn. Watching, always watching. That evening, Inspector Vieri visited the victim's car again. Something bothered him, something small, something that gnawed at the back of his mind. There was no dust on the dashboard, no smudges on the windows, no dirt on the floor mats. The inside of the vehicle was spotless, too spotless. Vieri ran his hand across the steering wheel. Smooth, clean, wiped. Someone had cleaned the inside of the car after the victims died. But why? As he stepped back, he noticed something else. A faint, barely visible mark near the car's rear fender. Not a fingerprint, not a boot print. Something carved. A letter. A single, etched M. Vieri's chest tightened. Who the hell leaves their initial? He murmured. He didn't know yet that it wasn't an initial. It was a signature, a symbol, a calling card. And it was only the beginning. As the sun disappeared and the Tuscan hills sank into darkness again, an officer shouted from the vineyard, "Inspector, you need to see this." Vieri hurried over. The vines parted. revealing a narrow path that hadn't been visible earlier, a hidden trail leading deeper into the woods. And on the first tree, pinned with a single rusted nail, was a strip of fabric, dark, torn, stained, not with blood, with something thicker, something blacker, something that hinted at decay. Vieri's heart pounded. Whoever they were chasing, they had just stepped into his maze, and he was leading them exactly where he wanted them. The forest swallowed the narrow trail the moment Inspector Matteo Vieri stepped onto it. The vines behind him rustled as if they were closing in, hiding the world he knew, pushing him deeper into a place that felt older and darker than the hills themselves. He lifted the strip of stained fabric pinned to the tree. It was coarse, almost burlap-like, and the black residue on it smelled faintly metallic. Not blood, not oil, something in between. "What are you trying to show me?" he whispered. As if an answer, a breeze sighed to the vineyard rose, carrying the unmistakable sensation of being watched. By the time he called his officers over, twilight had already tightened around them. Vieri ordered the trail to be searched, centimeter by centimeter. He wanted footprints, fibers, anything that could connect this eerie breadcrumb to an actual suspect. Instead, they found nothing. No footprints, no cigarette butts, no broken branches. Whoever had walked this way did so with the precision of a ghost. The next morning, Vieri met with a medical examiner at the small Florence morgue. The bodies of the young couple lay on 2 metal tables beneath harsh fluorescent lights. "Cause of death?" Vieri asked. The examiner hesitated. "That's the problem. I can't find one." Vieri frowned. "You're telling me 2 healthy adults simply died at the same time for no reason? No trauma, no toxins in preliminary blood tests, no heart issues, no neurological anomalies. Their organs look untouched." "Untouched," Vieri repeated. He stared at their faces, serene, peaceful, as though they had drifted off to sleep under the stars. But their bodies told a different story. Their muscles showed slight rigidity, subtle tension beneath the calm exterior. "They weren't relaxed," Vieri murmured. "Something scared them, but not enough to make them run." Or, the examiner added quietly, something paralyzed them before they could. A cold ripple moved through Vieri's spine. "Paralyzed by what?" The examiner shook his head. "That's what frightens me. I have no answer." Back at the vineyard, journalists swarmed the gates. Cameras flashed. Microphones shoved into the air. "Inspector, is there a serial killer? Do you have any suspects? Why would the victims pose? Is this connected to older cases? Is this the work of the monster?" The last question made Vieri stop. A retired reporter leaned forward. "Inspector, some villagers are saying this reminds them of the old legends. The shadow in the hills, the watcher who takes couples." Vieri snapped. "There's no monster. Only someone who wants you to believe there is." But he wasn't as confident as he sounded. That afternoon, Vieri visited the home of the man who discovered the fabric, the younger hiker, Leo Moretti. Leo sat on his couch, pale, trembling hands clasped tightly. "It was around midnight," Leo said. "We were walking back to our car after stargazing. And then we heard it." "Heard what?" Leo's breath hitched. "Footsteps. Slow ones. But not behind us. On both sides. Like someone was circling." Vieri leaned in. "Did you see him?" Leo nodded, eyes wide. Tall. Very tall. Thin. Wearing a long dark coat. He stood between the vines. Not moving. Just staring. The boy swallowed hard. "I blinked. And he was gone." "Gone," Vieri repeated. "Yes." No sound. No movement. Nothing. Vieri wrote it all down. Then he asked, "Why didn't you mention this earlier?" Leo lifted his shaking hands. "Because I thought maybe I imagined it. But then I remembered something." He went to his room and returned with a folded sketch, a rough pencil drawing. It showed a tall man with hollow cheeks and an elongated silhouette, eyes completely black. Vieri's blood ran cold, because he had seen a figure like this before, in an unsolved case from 6 years earlier, a case that had been quietly buried. That evening, Vieri met with retired Detective Julia Rinaldi, the investigator who had worked the old case. She greeted him with a stiff expression. "You shouldn't be digging this up." "Why were the files sealed?" Vieri demanded. "Because we never caught him, and because the more we looked, the less sense it made." "Tell me?" Julia hesitated before speaking. 3 couples, found in similar conditions, posed, peaceful, no signs of struggle, same absence of cause of death, same eerie objects left near the scene, a glove, a torn sleeve, a strip of cloth, always with that symbol carved nearby. "The M," Vieri whispered. Julia nodded. "We thought it was an initial. Then we realized it might be a symbol, a shape, the start of a pattern." "What pattern?" Julia took a long breath. "He's marking territory, mapping something, and he waits years at a time." "Why did the killing stop?" Vieri asked. Julia stared at him with tired, haunted eyes. "Because he chose to stop, not because he was caught." A silence stretched between them. Then she said the words Vieri had dreaded. "If the pattern is restarting, Matteo, you're not dealing with a killer who acts out of impulse." She placed a trembling hand on his arm. "You're dealing with someone who plans decades ahead." That night, as Vieri studied the case files at home, his phone vibrated. An unknown number. A text message. No words. No threats. Just a photo. A picture of the vineyard crime scene, taken from the woods, from behind the officers, from the killer's point of view. And at the bottom, barely visible in the shadows, a tall figure, watching. Inspector Matteo Vieri stared at the photo glowing on his phone screen. His pulse hammered in his ears. The image was unmistakable. The vineyard crime scene, captured from the perspective of someone hiding deep in the brush. Someone close enough to hear the officers breathe, close enough to see Vieri himself, standing only a few feet away. And there, buried in the shadows, the long silhouette of a man, the same hollow-faced figure Leo had described. The same impossible presence Julia had warned him about. Vieri zoomed in until the pixels blurred. "Who are you?" A message buzzed in moments later. "You're finally paying attention." By sunrise, Vieri was back at the vineyard with a tactical team. Drones skimmed the sky. Officers swept the surrounding woods. But nothing, no footprints, no fibers, no sign that anyone had ever been there. It was as if the killer had dissolved into the earth. Vieri pulled out the photo again, studying the angle of the branches, the density of the leaves, the faint line of the hill behind the figures. He traced the ridgeline with his thumb. He took it from higher ground. Vieri murmured. "Farther in." The officers followed him uphill, stepping through tangled underbrush. The deeper they moved into the forest, the quieter everything became. Even the birds seemed to hold their breath. Finally, they reached an old stone wall, crumbled, moss-covered, half devoured by roots. It looked ancient, as if forgotten for centuries. But unforgettably out of place was the symbol carved into one of the stones. The same angular M the killer always left behind. One officer backed up. "Sir, this wasn't here 3 weeks ago." "So he carved it recently," Vieri said. "Why here?" They pushed farther and discovered a narrow path leading to an abandoned farmhouse. The building sagged under its own weight, roof half-collapsed, windows boarded or missing. Vieri scanned the scene carefully. Something felt wrong. Too quiet, too still, too deliberate. He drew his flashlight and stepped toward the entrance. "Inspector," an officer whispered, "shouldn't we call for backup?" Vieri's jaw clenched. "No. Whoever did this wants to be found. And if we wait, we lose him." He pushed open the door. The smell of dust and old wood greeted him. Rays of pale light slipped through the ceiling cracks, illuminating grains floating in the air like falling ash. A long table stood in the center of the room, and on it, arranged in perfect order, were 3 items: a glove, a torn coat sleeve, a strip of rough fabric. The same objects found in previous cases, the same pattern. As Vieri approached, he noticed something else carved into the table's surface. A map. Scratched lines forming the hills, the vineyards, the forest paths. And in 3 places, small X marks. 3 couples. Vieri whispered. 3 crime scenes. No, a voice said behind him. 3 messages. Vieri spun around. At the far end of the room, a man stepped from the shadows. Tall, thin, face gaunt and emotionless, coat brushing the dust-covered floor. He looked almost unreal. Vieri raised his weapon, hands where I can see them. But the man didn't move. He simply watched Vieri with calm, dark eyes. You've been following for years, Inspector, but you never asked the right question. What question? The man tilted his head. Why couples? Why those locations? Why the symbols? Vieri tightened his grip. Because you want to taunt the police. Because you're building some twisted ritual. The man smiled faintly. No, because I wanted someone capable of understanding. Vieri's stomach flipped. Understanding what? The man stepped closer, slow and deliberate. That the pattern was not mine. I only discovered it. Vieri froze. What are you talking about? The man reached into his coat. Vieri steadied his aim, but the figure only pulled out an old, folded notebook. He tossed it gently onto the table. Vieri, keeping his weapon trained, opened it. The pages were filled with drawings, maps, symbols, sketches of the forest, dates going back decades, far older than the man standing before him. This isn't your handwriting, Vieri said. No, the man replied. It belonged to someone long before me, a wanderer, a reclusive traveler who mapped the region obsessively. Why? Because he believed, the man said, that the land itself was marked, that certain places were connected, that certain events would repeat. Vieri stared down at the pages. These dates, but these predate every crime scene. Yes, the man whispered. Every one. The room chilled. Vieri's voice was barely audible. You're telling me you didn't start this. The man looked straight into his eyes. I only continued it. And when I realized the pattern was real, I needed someone else to see it. Someone who wouldn't dismiss it as folklore or superstition. Vieri's skin prickled. Why me? The man stepped closer, almost gently. Because you already knew. You felt it. You sensed at the moment you entered the vineyard. Vieri swallowed. What did I sense? The man leaned near enough for Vieri to feel his breath. That it wasn't finished. A sudden crackling sound echoed from outside. Radios. Footsteps. Officers shouting. Backup had arrived. Vieri spun toward the door. Don't move. But when he turned back, the man was gone. The room was empty. Only the notebook remained on the table. And on the final page, written in fresh ink, was a new message. The pattern continues. The next mark appears in 6 months. Watch the hills. 6 months later, on a warm summer morning, a hiker in the Tuscan countryside reported something strange near an old stone wall. A new carving, the same symbol. Perfectly fresh, perfectly deliberate.